Hi, Guy Ardito here. And in our last video, I started talking about one of the dances of love, specifically when love goes wrong. We call it the assassination tango. And that's kind of when you find yourself having the same fight over and over again. No matter what the initial cause of it might be, everything seems to wind up descending to the same kind of fight. And when this happens over and over again, it's because there's an unmet need. It's because one or both partners feels an insecurity around the love, around the partnership. And just like a child, the emotional need is coming out. With adults, we tend to have an expectation of being in control and of not having the same kind of needs, for example, that a child does. But the reality is that deep down we do. Deep down we do. And no matter who you are, no matter whether you're a salesperson or a clerk or a programmer or a high-powered attorney or ambassador, anything, if the right situation comes to fruition, you're going to be rubbed the wrong way and your needs are going to come to the fore and you're going to start effectively crying out in some way. And sometimes this is around getting angry, will be a good display, right? Sometimes people will withdraw. You're not likely to just start crying like a baby, waving your arms around, right? That's considered socially unacceptable. But emotionally, deep down, you are going to act out in some kind of way. So I promised that in the next episode, that's this episode, we're going to talk about what do you do to actually handle that, whether it's happening with you or with your partner. And the first thing is something I just covered a minute ago, which is to recognize the source of it is fear. The source of it is our insecurity around the love that we're not so sure about anymore, even though the other person might feel it's very secure. So recognize that we have this need for attachment, this need for love, and that when we're feeling insecure, even though we might not realize it, we might not put two and two together quite that way, that's what's going on. The next step is to stop accusing, stop telling your partner, you do this and it makes me feel this way, or you don't do enough of that, whatever case may be. Use the I. Talk about I. I feel this way. I need this. I want that. Now, the second part of that is taking responsibility. Again, both partners taking responsibility for how we impact, how we influence the other person's behavior, the other person's state, the other person's feeling, the other person's sense of security, sense of love, sense of attachment with you, right? So really step back and look at what do you do? How do you participate in the dance? Do you lash out initially? Do you lash out reactively in defense? Do you just withdraw and want to pretend that something's not happening or someone is not there, right? It may seem fine to you to be that way. It might be how you were brought up. It might be how your family handled situations. Or it might be the opposite of that, right? You might have decided that your family handled things really poorly, so you're going to go in the opposite direction. Regardless, just because it's working for you doesn't mean that it's working for your partner. It certainly doesn't mean that it's the only way, much less the right way. So we have to appreciate how the way we're handling our own stress directly influences our partner in a major way. And when there's an incompatibility there, and that doesn't mean that you're not compatible as lovers, as partners, as friends in the relationship, but when there's an incompatibility behind how we deal with a stressful situation, with an upset, with a disappointment, with a disconnection, well, that's when things escalate. That's when things keep coming up over and over and over again, and they build and build and build. And we start to question whether or not the relationship is actually valid, whether or not it actually can continue on, whether it's the right one for us, whether we should stay in it. So, again, there's a lot there. 3 things that you have to do, right? 1, 2, 3. Number 1, you have to recognize that all of this is coming from fear. From a fear of losing love, a fear of losing attachment. Doesn't matter how much or how little you're getting, we all have different needs. And whenever what we're getting falls below the level that we need, the inner part of us starts to lash out. And the longer it goes on that we're not getting what we need, the more it's going to act up in a way, whether that's literally lashing out aggressively or pulling back and withdrawing. Number 2 is to take responsibility for ourselves. Rather than accusing our partner, just say, I feel this, I need this, I want this. Make sure that they understand. Don't just help them to understand. Really make sure that they understand. And finally, number three, take responsibility for how what you're doing impacts how they feel, impacts their own sense of security, their own sense of love, their own sense of attachment and fulfillment. Okay? 3 easy points to remember. Not always that easy to actually follow through on. Not complicated, right? But emotionally, it can be hard because we're talking about vulnerability. And also, frankly, in our society, all too often we come to a point of displacing blame onto someone else. And this is very much about accepting responsibility, really being a grown-up. And, the people that I work with that sometimes have the hardest time with this are the people who are very high-powered, very successful in executive positions, or maybe they're lawyers, judges, or have other influential positions of power. They're accustomed to being in charge and having people see them in charge. So they're not accustomed to feeling vulnerable. And what's really important to remember is that their partners oftentimes have a difficult time seeing them as potentially vulnerable because they're almost larger than life, right? They're generally powerful people. They're in charge. How could they be feeling needy? How could they be feeling vulnerable? I'm here to tell you, doesn't make a difference who you are, doesn't make a difference what you do. We all have these needs. And if your relationship is one where you guys keep having the same fight over and over again, keeps barking up, then that's what's going on. So again, this is Guy Ardito. If you're interested in more education, if you're interested in any of my programs or group or private coaching, you can just check me out at guyardito.com. I'd love to work with you. In the meantime, remember, life is an adventure. Live in love.